we're trying to make adjustments so that we've got a sustainable budget that works for us over the long term. And by the way, there are just some things that just aren't working at all. So we've eliminated a couple of hundred programs.
Eliminated a couple of hundred programs. Well, why wasn't the post office, the departments of education, energy, commerce, and transportation among those couple of hundred programs? Turns out that part of the president's fiscal year 2012 budget proposal recommends $11 billion in relief for the post office, especially when FedEx and UPS do the same things, make huge profits, and charge less. Here to discuss are my Freedom Fighters Fox Business Network senior correspondent, my buddy and colleague, Charlie Gasparino, Mises Institute chair, Lou Rockwell, and radio host and Freedom Watch regular, Nancy Skinner. Lou, to you first. Can we count on the government to cut its budget, ever to spend less than it takes in?
Judge, I wish we could, but I don't think so. I think we're going to have the big international financial crisis of the dollar and of the Treasury debt before they cut. We're going to have the crisis that I noticed that even Robert Rubin, Clinton's former Treasury Secretary, was predicting just the other day. That's coming down the road very, very fast and unavoidable because of these deficits.
Does Wall Street like when the government has a debt of $1.6 trillion?
Well, they do.
Who would loan money?
Well, they do get to underwrite some of that debt. So
right.
Remember, you know, I am not of the opinion that Wall Street is a particularly capitalist, the way we understand capitalist place. You know, interest rates may go up at some point, but I think what's scary about this is the notion that you have someone bragging about cutting a couple of hundred programs when we know that budget is littered with gazillions. And the only thing I would say to Lou is that just because this is what he proposed, that doesn't mean this is what we're going to get. We're going to see if the Tea Party, if Paul Ryan, the Budget Committee Chairman of the House, the new Republican Budget Committee Chairman, if these guys are real, if they have the cojones to do the job.
Nancy Skinner, the president's secretary.
Paul Ryan.
Go ahead, Lou. Go ahead, Lou.
I was just going to say, Paul Ryan voted for TARP. He voted for all the Bush deficits, all the Bush spending. I'll believe it when I see it with him, too.
All right. Nancy Skinner.
You might be right.
Nancy Skinner, the president has proposed a budget which, if projected out over the next 10 years, I realize they adopt a different budget each year, would never spend less than they take in. The president's Secretary of State and Chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff have each said the worst national security crisis we have is the debt. What is the president doing about the debt? Nothing.
He's reducing it.
Wait a minute. He wants to borrow $1.6 trillion. What do you mean he's reducing it?
Okay. Judge, okay, his 2012 budget takes that $1.6 trillion deficit this year down to $1.1 trillion next year. Do the math. That's a cut. Now, let me give you, I love analogies. Here is the analogy. The last president that actually had a surplus was George Bush. Blew it, right? You and I agree on this. You have a car that's broken. You have to spend $200 on a repair to get to your $20,000 job. Does it make sense to say, A, $200 is spending. Spending is bad, not going to do it. Does it make sense to pay $200 to get your $20,000 job? Or finally, does it make sense to do the $200 and invest in a $200 computer course to make a $40,000 income? That's what you have to do. Cut and invest so that you grow.
Nancy, I love you. What are you talking about?
The government's a parasite. You can't compare it to a job in the private sector. The government's a parasite.
When was the last time the government? I just like to know. I just want to make 2 points. First off, George Bush inherited a looming recession from President Clinton after the NASDAQ bubble burst. We forget that he inherited he inherited $3 trillion.
Clinton actually balanced the budget.
Yes, but he balanced the budget on the backs of a bubble in the NASDAQ stock market, which fueled the entire economy. And listen, I'm not saying George Bush is a good guy. I'm saying that's the historical.
Nancy Skinner and the Democrats cannot take credit for reducing the debt when instead of borrowing $2 trillion, he's going to borrow $1.6 trillion.
Right. And the notion of the government investing. I mean, come on. What are they investing in? Windmills? I mean,
Lou Rockwell, when is the last time the government invested money in anything and it turned out to be a prudent investment?
Well, the government makes all decisions on political grounds.
Hang on, Nancy.
It can't invest. What is an investment? You put money in the hopes of making a profit. That's not what government does. Government just spends entirely for political reasons, whether it's Obama's new rails or more government schools, more government indoctrination. This is not what this country needs.
Skinner.
We need less government.
Skinner.
Okay, listen, it's a competitive world. We can't compete on cheap labor unless we want to live by the living standards of the developing world. What we can do is we can innovate. Clean technologies, the transition from oil to solar and hydrogen, to educating our people so they're the brightest in the world. That's where we can invest, and only the government can do certain things.
I can only tell you, listen, I mean, we can take each one of her solutions there one by one, but I'll just give you public education. Why is it in New York City that when you go to a public school, you get this lousy education? That's the public school that's financed not just by our taxpayer money, but by federal government money. And when you go to a Catholic school, and you're not that much different in sort of wages and income, but when you go to that Catholic school, you get a much better education.
Because government equals waste, Lou, right?
I mean, come on.
Yeah, and because also government's intention in the public schools is to make sure children can't think independently and can't think critically. In the Catholic schools, they're trying to teach them that.
This is conspiratorial craziness.
The government wants to create little guys
yes, they
who will
want
do
people,
what they say.
They want little
give
androids
them the money,
who can't think
go
for
fight
themselves.
in Afghanistan, all the rest of those wonderful projects.
Nancy, let me switch gears. Should we be paying for the problems caused by Fannie and Freddie, Nancy? Should we be paying the legal bills of the people who messed up Fannie and Freddie in our name with our tax dollars?
Well, I love this. Lawyers making decisions that we should pay legal fees is what this is about. Should have been over a long time ago, Judge. But these executives settled with the regulators. Now you have an Ohio Mike DeWine, who was a former congressman, suing as AG. So is this a political tax-driven sort of boondoggle? But you know what? The administration has put out a course to get off of Freddie and Fannie. They gave 3 options in February to completely privatize.
Here's the problem
Who's talking about that?
Here's the problem that you had, Nancy. Fannie and Freddie were sort of hybrids. They were publicly traded companies that were backed up by the government. And guess what? If you're a publicly traded company, a real publicly traded company, you're in it with lawsuits against anybody. That's what you're supposed to be. You should be ready for that. And you know what? D&O Insurance should have paid for that, not the federal government.
Lou, he's right. If this was a real company that was really making money, that was really risking its own money, it would have had private insurance to defend these guys rather than the taxpayers being on the hook.
No, that's right, Judge, and they're not private companies. They're Mussolini-style companies, public-private partnerships, and have gotten, this whole economy in very deep trouble. So should these guys who are making millions of dollars a year, should they be bailed out by the average guy who's making, $20,000 a year?
Skinner, even the president,
before they're put in the stocks on the Capitol front lawn is my idea.
Skinner, even the president wants to get rid of Fannie and Freddie. What do the Democrat rank and file think about that?
I think this is something we could maybe all agree on. And they laid out 3 proposals: complete privatization and partial, and then something so that if something happens again to the housing market, it doesn't collapse. But here's the risk. If you go right away and just eliminate it, people will not be able to afford a prepaid 30-year mortgage. That is a luxury because there's a secondary mortgage market. Fannie fueled it. If you free,
here we go again. The government's going to take care of all
You know what? Maybe housing prices might go down. Maybe housing prices then might go down to reflect the market.
Too much debt.
Yeah, and maybe housing prices might go down to reflect the market, so you don't have to take out these crazy loans. So you can actually put down 30%.
Got it. Gasparino, Skinner,
that they can't have a 30-year mortgage.
Thank you for joining us, guys. Tonight, the plain truth on the president, the Congress, and your money. Next.